All right, we are live for another episode of Real Estate Junkies podcast. In this podcast, what we do is highlight extraordinary individuals, their journey into real estate, and the impact they're making in the industry. And today, I have with me Kevin Kauffman. He is a real estate agent, investor, and an entrepreneur. In 2008, he co-founded the nation's most successful teams group, 4610 Network, which has sold over 3,000 houses. He is the host of the Next Level Agents podcast and the co-founder of the real estate mastermind Next Level Agents. Kevin, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure having you here.
Hey, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be here.
For sure, man. It's my pleasure. Kevin, you have sold over 3,000 houses with the group. What's the secret sauce behind such an astounding success, especially starting in the tough year of 2008?
Well, so let me be honest. It's not like I've personally sold the 3,000 houses. I run a team, right? And so I'm just a big believer, and everything is done through relationships and people. It's never, I shouldn't say never. It can be about your own personal effort, and we all need to put out effort. But the reality is any sort of success worth having, in my opinion, requires relationships and other people. And so, um, I just want to start off by at the top of it saying, no way that happens without number one, my business partner, and number two, the amazing team that we've built up over the last now 15 plus years, 16 plus years.
Wow, relationships. Okay. So in an era where real estate market has been so volatile, right, over the last decade at least, right? So how do you adapt and innovate to ensure the consistency of sales and client satisfaction in your businesses?
Well, that's an interesting question. Adapt and innovate. I think I'm gonna separate the question if you don't mind. I
Sure.
think that you adapt out of necessity, right? The folks that don't adapt, they either get forced into adaptation later, or they get forced into a different line of work, and so and that's okay. But I do believe adapting is required, right? It's not something that is optional, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, Innovation, I have a little bit of a different take on. I'm not an innovator. I don't consider myself an innovator. In fact, when I think of the word innovation, I think of distraction. I think of people who want to see, like right now, it's AI, and it's not that we can't adapt and use AI because we do, I do, um, but it's not like I'm innovating with AI. I think that anybody who thinks that sees themselves as an innovator or wants to be innovative, I would just say maybe go a little bit deeper on that and say, hey, there's a to me, innovation feels like distraction, I guess is what I'm trying to say again. And adaption feels like I'm doing what I got to do to stay alive, to keep going in this business. Because I think as people maybe are just now starting to realize, as we're recording this in August of 2023, staying alive is actually sometimes that is the battle in our business. This really is a war of attrition at times, and adaption is what's required in order to do that. Like when I got licensed, I actually got licensed in '07. My business partner and I started working together in '08. During that time, there was a lot of real estate agents that had previously been very successful, like extremely successful, who had not adapted. And quite frankly, they were going extinct because at that time it was basically short sales, foreclosures, or really nothing else, at least in
Mm,
my market. Right.
yeah.
And so you were forced to adapt, and not everybody did. And then likewise, as things got, I'll say, better, if you will, as the market returned to more normal in 2011 and 12 and 13, I saw the people that were experts like me in a niche area like short sales or foreclosures who were failing to adapt to this new quote unquote normal market. And quite frankly, a lot of those people that I knew that even sold way more homes than I ever did, like they're gone. They're no longer in the business, literally, because they never adapted. They couldn't get out of that mindset of what it was like in that time. And I think in order to continue to survive, you've got to adapt.
That's a really interesting perspective. Actually, the way I look at innovation is just evolution of the business, right? So the business shifts, the market shifts, the industry shifts. Right now, I feel like what we are going through is an industry shift more than a market shift. Yes, the market is up and down and volatile. So, as an investor and entrepreneur, as a business owner yourself, what are the, I guess, top three trends you see shaping the future of real estate? Like, how should real estate agents, real estate brokers prepare for them?
Well, I'm not sure how brokers should prepare for them, to be honest with you. I think it's tough to be a broker in this day and age. I would hate to own a brokerage. I had that opportunity, and I owned a franchise a long time ago, sold it, almost when it started an independent brokerage, put the brakes on that. I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that question about brokers because I feel like more and more it's going to be harder and harder. As an agent, I think that what we're going to see sort of on our side, what I mean by the our side is the agent side of the business, is there's got to be more partnerships. And I don't actually mean like a traditional partnership like my business partner and I, where we're like 50-50 on all of our businesses. That's not what I mean. But I mean something like, I'm involved, I partner with another company called Place, right? I also consider EXP Realty my partnership. And so having sort of, I guess, maybe not partnerships, but communities or partnerships with communities, I think is going to be vital because it's going to be easier to survive in a group than it is on your own. And so I think some of the trends we're going to see is more partnerships becoming basically requirement for survival. And I think like any other time in the last 10 years, you're going to have to continue to adapt and adopt technology. And I think that more than ever, this is maybe two-pronged approach. So I'm going to give you four answers instead of three. It's going to be understanding marketing at a higher level. And I mean, when I say marketing, I mean actually speaking to the market. I'm not talking about how you do it, whether that's postcards or online or whatever, but I mean the message. And then the other piece of it is actually connecting with them as human beings. Like we use this word leads, and I'm guilty of it as much as anybody else. But we have got to continue to remember that on the other side of that lead is another human being, and we've got to be able to connect with them. And I think the better we do that, the more control we're going to have over number one, their experience, and ultimately number two, our potential income.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So let's start with like what you mentioned first, collaborating. And I think that collaboration, especially where the industry is going with the aging of the industry, I think is crucial. And you mentioned EXP, so you're part of EXP. I'm assuming. Honestly, I didn't know. I just found out. What made you partner up with EXP?
You know, a number of things, but as I really think back, it's because it's been over 5 years now. What I really liked is it felt like, and it's still here's the best part. 5 years in, it feels this way even more so. That that as an agent, I was what matters most to the company, right? And not the company's brand as an example. And I'm not saying the companies that focus on their own brand versus the agent is right or wrong, but this is what was mattered to me is I felt like my future mattered most to the company, and that meant a lot to me. The fact that as a as partial owner, if you will, of the company or a shareholder, it puts more people sort of in the same direction, right? Like the same North Star. And to
Mm,
me, that's important because again, it's the power of a community that I
yeah.
believe in that is so powerful. Because it's, when I look back on my career over the last 16 years, the times that I've made big leaps and moved forward, it usually had to do with an experience of collaboration with other people where I learned something or I was around other people and being able to mastermind and so forth. And that's what really catapulted our business forward. And so that's why those things are important to me.
For sure. And you mentioned lead. So the way I define lead is an opportunity to build a relationship. And I see a lot with real estate agents, and obviously our audience is real estate agents, is that, they're judging good lead, bad lead, right? Like, oh, those leads are bad and those leads are good. And I find myself again and again repeating myself like, hey, a lead is just an opportunity for you to build relationship, and you shouldn't judge it just because they're not, real estate agents are looking for clients where there is like that opportunity, right? So, they're looking for a ready, willing, and able buyer or a seller. And if it's not that, they're like turned off by it, right? So it's just like either they haven't been taught, or they don't understand the journey of building their relationship.
Yeah, I think there's this desire to have it be easier than it is. There's a desire for it to come faster than it is. I always say like the definition of a good lead versus a bad lead. A good lead gets contacted. Bad leads don't get called. That's the difference. Like that is the difference. I remember we used to buy this one just total crappy source of leads, and if I said I could say their name to like 100 real estate agents, and 97 of them would be like, "Oh, those leads suck." But the three of us that worked those leads, like for a long time, they were my biggest source of listings. And so, but because it's like digging through dirt, right? And so I think that it's about the effort. And the reality is, um, yeah, you've got to build relationships, especially in a market like this. People, I'm not one of those Zillow haters. I don't hate on Zillow or Realtor.com or any of those companies. I think that they're providing often, just like Open Door, they're providing a service and doing things that we as real estate agents chose not to do for too long of a period of time. And so they took that area from us, right? And so
Mm,
now agents will pay a 35% referral fee to a company like Zillow or whoever that hands them a warm connection. And I
yeah.
get it. I'm not for that or against it. I think there's a good way to do that, and I think there's a bad way to do that. But the reason why those companies can control it is because they're controlling the relationship with the person on the other side,
Mm,
that lead, if you will. And so,
yep.
yes, it's an invitation to a lead. And the reality is this is totally non-scientific, but I'm just going to say, if you get 100 leads on your website this month, okay, know this: those 100 leads also registered on 10 other websites, all 100 of them. Nobody just registered on your website. Okay. So not only that, but only about 3 of them are going to buy or sell real estate in the next 90 days. And here's what happens is the 10 of us with that website that capture that lead, we're going to argue, we're going to fight over those 3% of leads that do business right now. And then most everyone's going to ignore the actual 97% that's going to transact in the next 18 months.
Yep.
And whether my viewpoint was always if it was 12 months or 24 months or 36 months, I didn't care because I would still be licensed. I just want to be the guy that they call. And so I
Mm,
start putting in the work right now.
mhm.
And most people just don't do that. And so they see this, they get these leads. They're like, great, I'm getting a lot of leads, but none of them are converting. Well, it's like, yeah, you're not putting in the effort, and you actually have to give it time. Like time has to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an interesting perspective. And I have built my business around that 97%. I set up systems, and all of my business, majority of my hour efforts. Look, it takes very few effort or less effort to convince people who are ready now, right? Yes, maybe you're competing against other agents. It's actually the way I looked at it from the beginning when I started with Zillow myself, and you can write me down as a Zillow hater actually, but it's not from a perspective that I hate on what they do. I just hate the fact that real estate agents don't do enough to be able to capture the business that Zillow is capturing, or don't set up systems in their businesses. Every single real estate agent has the capacity to set up the same systems Zillow has, right? What are they doing? Google PPC, Google SEO, and Facebook, Instagram ads, right? Like, how complicated is that, right? It's all just websites, blogs, and like setting up ads. So to me, the way I look at it is just every single real estate agent has the opportunity or capacity. They just need to learn the skill set or outsource that skill set and set up that system for themselves. But now beyond that is just that understanding that the leads that are going to come into your system, not 100% of them are going to be ready, willing, and able. That number nine, actually the number could be even less. It could be 93% that are not ready. 7% could be ready if you have the right conversations, if you approach them properly, right? But I built a business, I have a database of 130,000 people around this concept that I'm in the business of, the same business Zillow is conquering data, right? Like, my job is to capture as much data as possible and retargeting that database over and over again. And that's the only way I could win in this time and age. Tesla, not a car company, data company. Apple, Microsoft, they're not computer companies, they're data companies, right? The
Yeah.
data piece of it completely controls and determines their profitability in those companies. So it's the same way around all the way across. Now, let's talk about podcasting, right? Like we are on a podcast right now, but it's booming right now when it comes to building authority, right? Especially with your Next Level Agents podcast. What inspired you to start it, and how has it transformed your approach when it comes to real estate?
You know, what inspired me to start it was so two things, I guess. Number one, my business partner and I have always, when I say always, I mean like down before I had even been licensed for a year, I'd always been giving away content and information, right? Teaching classes, creating videos. Um, I always wanted a podcast. Because I like to sit down with people like you are now and ask them questions and just sort of get to know them, figure out what makes them tick, figure out what makes their business so successful, what their strength and unique abilities are. And so I always wanted to have an excuse to do that where, it's something when you get someone in person, like at an event, you can sneak away and go have a cup of coffee and kind of do that. Um, but like to really pepper somebody and really put them on the hot seat, I felt like I needed an excuse, right? And so for me, that was a podcast. So I always wanted one, but I thought it was much harder, than it really was. And I just happened to have an employee one day who told me, she said something to the effect of like, that video you guys just made, like I could take that and make a podcast with it. I was like, what do you mean? And so she's like, I said, so you could take a video that I record and then you could just take the audio and make that a podcast. And she said, yeah. And I said, I'll be right back. And I literally started, that was 4.5 years ago. It was November, more than that. I guess it was November of 18. So coming up on
Wow.
5 years, I said, I'll be right back. And I started recording podcasts and, 600 episodes in now to my
Wow,
podcast.
that
And
is crazy. I'm
yeah,
closing on in on 100 over a year. Now, it's much simpler, right? It's much simpler than people take it as. Like in my
yes.
experience, what I have found is just that it's not no big deal. You just record, and I actually, since starting, I actually started just voice recording myself doing episodes, and it's just stupid simple. I think a lot of people make a big deal about it. Now, for those just starting in the industry or feeling overwhelmed, obviously, like over the last 2 3 years, we have had a lot of agents get into the market. What's your number one piece of advice to achieve success as you have with your group?
To be adaptable, right? Number one. And I think if you're gonna be adaptable, that means you're probably the type of person that learns in like you don't um there's that saying basically if you think you already know it, like there's nothing for you to learn. So you can't be a know-it-all. Like you actually have to be teachable. I think that's super important. Um, you got to be willing to put in the work. Like,
Mm.
and you also got to learn how to be focused. Because the reality is once you do quote unquote figure it out, you realize it's really kind of boring to find success in almost anything. It's the results that can be exciting, but the
Yep.
work itself tends to be pretty dang boring. And
Mm.
think on a certain level, you got to be okay with that.
Yep. For sure. And next level agents, right? Your mastermind implies a step above the, norm or the rest. What would you say the one trait or skill set that truly differentiates that level?
I think it's just a desire to get better. It's not even, hey, I'm at this level. Like, you might be selling, say, a solo agent selling 25 homes a year, and you want to figure out how to get to 100 or 50. Or you
Mm,
might be running a big team that sells 250 homes a year, and you want to figure out how to get to 500. To me, it doesn't matter sort of how quote unquote big your goal is or whatever. It's the desire to go from where I'm at to another level. Because I believe if we're going to do that, that means we're going to have to grow as people and
yep.
business owners and to me that requires a next level. And so the other reason I also don't like to define it is, I was at Keller Williams for the first, 11 years of my career. And
Wow.
and I loved most of it, right? But one thing that really always didn't sit well with me was like everybody on stage, and I was one of them. Everybody on stage sort of looked the same, sounded the same, and you really weren't allowed to be on quote unquote stage if you didn't have the company line. And the reality is what I learned is our business really started to transform and take off. And me really starting to dig and ask questions was there's a lot of different ways to be successful in this business. There's a lot of different models. And there wasn't just this one way of doing things that worked. There was a lot of ways. And so for me, Next Level Agents was like, hey, this isn't just about running things like this. Because what I see, and this happens at all brokerages, not just KW, at all brokerages, you get one team, you get this like, there's this overwhelming sort of model. Like maybe there's a team or an agent that does things a certain way. And it's like everyone tries to look like them and be a copycat. And you don't have to do that. Like it should the way you go about building your business should have to do with, I think, who you are as a person and the type of business you want to have and the type of relationship you want to have with your business. And so for me, Next Level Agents was the ability to say, hey, let's talk to people who want to get better, no matter what better looks like for them, and no matter what their model looks like. So if, like,
Mhm.
forget about
Yeah.
what your jersey says or anything like that.
Amazing. So how long have you been running this mastermind, and can you share a moment from, running this mastermind that impacted or changed the way you do things?
It's gosh, I think in October is going to be 7 years. Hold on.
Wow.
It was October of 2017. So I take that back, 2017. So that'll make 6 years. So 6 years in October. And I think the first time it really made an impact was our first live event in 2018. We decided to see if we could get people together in a room in Vegas for a 1 day event. And we got that community out there for a 1 day event, like 225 people, our first try. And it was awesome, man, to really feel the community come together, to realize there's these resources that we have readily available for everybody
Hmm.
that anybody could tap into. And so putting together that first live event was a big game changer for us.
Wow. And over the years, there must have been, some challenging times, I can only assume, or deals that didn't work out as planned, right? Or business planning, right? So how do you turn those, or how did you turn those setbacks into comebacks for yourself?
Well, I'll say I don't think I've ever had a business plan work out because, as a driver and somebody who could probably be defined as like a visionary, if you will, though I'm not in love with that word. I sort of see things before they're actually complete. Like I see what can be done. And so my business partner, I always say, it turns out everything costs more and takes longer than we expect. A better way of putting that is don't mistake a clear view for a short drive, right? Just
Mhm.
because you can see clearly through that windshield does not mean that it's a short drive. Like there's a
Mm.
long way to go. And I think as people who are very entrepreneurial, which a lot of us as in real estate are, we see the clear view, and then we're wondering like why we're not already there.
Hmm. Wow, that's profound. Now, given your vast experience, if you could go back to your first year in real estate, right? What's one thing you would do differently, and why?
If I could go back to my first, oh man, I mean, okay, so here's a funny story. My very first deal was one of my very best friends. I mean, luckily he still is. I just spoke to him yesterday. Um, but my very first deal, I showed him 55 houses.
Wow,
I should say I showed him and his fiance 55 houses.
not bad. There probably was 300 houses available in that criteria, anyways.
Well, no, I mean, it was 2007, man. So there was
Oh,
literally
okay.
55,000 homes on the market in Phoenix, literally. Um, I showed him 55 houses because I didn't know what I was doing. I really had no control over that transaction. Like looking back, um, I wish I could just go back. The thing I did right is I learned a lot, and the thing that I wish I could have done more of is I wish I would have just taken my database more seriously right away.
Hmm. Wow. That's amazing. Now, what would you say? Like what I see coaching and training agents over the last 3 years, and you have experienced way more than me, at least double, if not more. Um, what I see with real estate agents is that treating this business as a job, or owning a job, or treating it as a deal to deal type of thing, or like side income, or whatever the case may be. Like, what would you say to agents that are not treating this as a business, and how can they get into that business mindset more?
I would say number one, it's okay as long as you're aware of the choice that you're making. To
Hmm.
me, it's okay to treat this as a job if you'd like to, but it's even more important to be honest with yourself that that's what you're doing.
Hmm.
Uh, but if you want to treat it like a business and you want it to become a business, then you have to start taking actions that don't impact the next 30 days. Okay, so I'll tell you. So I run like a book club, and where we read a book with some of our friends, and I get the author of the book to come spend some time with us. And so we just did that on Friday with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He just recently wrote a book called 10x is easier than 2x. And if you haven't read that book, I highly suggest it. But was explaining something to me. He said, we've got this, people have this model of behavior, right? Where we got our past, our present, and our future. And most people behave like their present is determined by their past. But really, what should happen is if we want to be able to grow, say like 10x or go from job to business, then what we need to do is think about what our present or what our future is. And that determines our present actions. That determines how we behave today, not
Hmm.
what we've already experienced. So that's not to like underscore the the bad things that we've all been through in our life and all of the things that impact the way we think and feel. However, if we want to grow, we have got to think about the future and let the future control what our present experience is.
Wow, that is definitely a great advice. Now, finally, Kevin, with all the successes and challenges that you have faced, what keeps you motivated and hungry in the real estate industry, and what's the next big thing we can expect from you?
What keeps me hungry and motivated? I think I have a strong desire to experience life with my family at the highest level. I read another book last year that literally changed my life called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. And so I've got two young kids, an 8 and 10-year-old daughter, and making sure that number one, that they have the things that I never had in my life growing up. But number two, as a family, we experience things together that will last us all our lifetimes, no matter how long that is. And so that's the thing that keeps me going is the reality is that takes a lot of money to do those things. I don't make the most money. I've got plenty of friends that make significantly more money than I do, but I feel like I've got it pretty good. I'm just coming off what, basically 3 months off,
Mm,
traveled the entire summer with my
wow.
family. We had a good time, right? Because for me, time and family is a higher priority than maximum amount of money.
Mm.
And so however, there is a time when you gotta go back and you've gotta do the activities that do make the money, right? So there's this balance of those things, and so I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that keeps me going is my desire. It's, maybe a more trite way of saying is I like expensive shit too, just like the next guy, and so, that means I've gotta figure out a way work hard, I don't think is the right word, but I've gotta be able to work smart to be able to continue to grow my income. So that's that, and then as far as what's next that's big for me, I'll tell you the only thing I can think of right now that sort of matters work-wise is we're doing another event in December called NLA Live, Next Level Agents Live in Scottsdale. And we're putting together a 2-day event with, I think, some of the top speakers, both in our industry and outside of it. And to me, a time like this where the cycle is, you and I were talking about a little while ago, it's like, it's a tough cycle that we're in. And for some people, it's the first bit of um, I would say hard they've had to deal with in their real estate career. And
Yeah.
so I think number one, having the right mindset on how to get through a time like this is important. Um, Having some of the skills and tactics that are more relevant today than they would have been, say, 2 years ago, is super important. And then also making decisions about the long-term future and our wealth, not just next month's commission checks, are also are the three main important things. And so that's kind of like the focus of our 2-day event is to hone in on those three things right at the end of the year, December 5th and 6th. So that way we can hit 2024, with some massive momentum and make sure that we all survive it, But here's the thing, because of where the market is, and I've seen this happen before, if you can even just survive and stay at the same level that you've been at, I know that's not fun, but
Yeah.
that's a win. Like that is a win because people are getting out of the industry like crazy. So just being able to maintain, and if you can even grow some, then
Yeah.
what will happen is as the market turns, whenever it starts to turn again, whether that's 24 or 25, doesn't matter, you will just be catapulted even further. And
Yep.
so that is, to me, that's super important. And that's kind of got all my focus and energy at this point.
Amazing. And in my opinion, I believe, that's just my opinion, people who survive until April of next year, they're gonna do pretty good. They're gonna have a pretty good time next year. Rates are supposed to be being normal more beginning of next year. Again, Kevin, it's been a pleasure. Can we expect to see you at the EXPCon?
Yeah, I'll be at EXPCon October 2nd through 5th, and I'm excited for that.
For sure. I'm looking forward to see you. Again, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast and definitely looking forward to collaborate with you more. I'm going to get more details on that and check with the wife if we can maybe hit up Arizona in
Yeah.
December and attend your NLA live and see how what you guys are up to over there. Again, for those of you listening in, either if you listened in live or you're going to listen to the recording later, I want to do something for you. Industry is definitely changing, and the market is definitely in a tough spot. With I'm hearing from agents in my coaching program, App City upping their referral fees to 40%, and all these marketing agencies come together. I want to do something for you. For those of you who know, I've been teaching my lead gen secrets to agents and brokers over 2 years now. These are the same strategies that helped me generate a database of 130,000 people and close over 1,000 transactions myself. In the past, I have charged over $6,000 for this course and my framework, where I give you my exact Facebook, Instagram ads and messenger bot conversation flows. In the spirit of where we are as the market, I will be giving away this course at no cost to 5 agents every week. So if you're interested, feel free to send me a message. Find me on Instagram, Facebook, with lead gen if interested, or put it in the comments of this video. I'll give this out to 5 agents every week. All right, thank you, Kevin.
That's
Thanks again.
awesome. Thank you
Thank
for
you for
having
everything.
me.
All right.